Yep. Welcome to the BigBandology podcast. I'm Eric Dregney, and this is part 2 of Building the Big Band. Last week was all about that bass. Today we flip 180 and talk about the top of the band. I started off the show with a part of Mike Camo's arrangement of Nardas recorded by the SKatch Anderssen Orechestra, playing lead trumpet, and my guest this week is Scott Mckee. He talks about what motivated and inspired him, and what it takes to be a top call lead player. Coming up. If you want to start building a house, you need a plan. Part of the plan is figuring out all of the most important and essential parts of the project. First, you need a foundation. From there, everything else can be built on top of it. In a big band, the foundation is made up of 3 parts: the bass, the lead trumpet, and the drums. The bass is the bottom. Its job is to set the feel, the groove, and the intonation. They are dedicated to keeping time and are almost constantly playing. Sometimes the job of the bass player is referred to as driving the bus. The drums keep the rhythm and time going by working with the bass player to support them and create a strong feel or pocket that the band uses while they are playing. They're also there to help communicate to the band where to play by adding hits, accents, and rhythmic setups that are included in the music, so the horns can line up and play cleanly, but we'll get into more of that in the next episode. This week, we talk about the lead trumpet. They're the one that sits on the top of the summit of the horn section. They carry the melody and set the style that helps create the identity for a band. Sometimes they use brute force to ride on top of 12 or more roaring engines. Other times they have to set a very soft dynamic and force everyone else to be underneath them and blend into one lush voice. Lead trumpet means different things to different people. Starting in the 1940s and into the mid-1960s, the example of lead trumpet playing to many people was Conrad Gozzo. He was an in-demand as they come, playing with Stan Kenton, Harry James, Nelson Riddle, Shorty Rogers, and Frank Sinatra, just to name the very few. He was regularly on many of the major live television shows, and on motion picture soundtracks such as The Glenn Miller Story, The Benny Goodman Story, Ben-Hur, and Cleopatra. Sadly, he passed away from a heart attack in October of 1964 at the young age of 42. Here he is featured with Luis Alcaraz's band, playing You Go to My Head. Another person that set the standard for lead trumpet playing during that time and into the 1970s was Bernie Glow. Another high-demand player, Glow played anywhere and everywhere he could. One minute he'd be recording commercials, the next he'd be doing sessions for a young Quincy Jones or Oliver Nelson. He was on the seminal recordings created by the combination of Miles and Davis and Gil Evans, such as Miles Ahead and Porgy and Bess. Like Gozzo, he also played in the NBC and CBS studio orchestras. Here's Bernie playing on the album Big Band Swing with Ted McNabb and company. Listening to those guys, you hear that sound. It's big, full, and it literally rides on top of everything. In the clip with Conrad, you hear the throwback style to Harry James, Ray Anthony, and the guys that brought an orchestra-like sound to the big band style. With the clip from Bernie, you can hear that he's in perfect sync with the bass and the drums. All three are moving together with a purpose, and the band has no choice but to hop on and go along for the ride. Some people equate the role of the lead trumpet as being the person who plays all the high notes. That is part of the job, but that's not the job. When Maynard Ferguson was on the Kenton Band, he wasn't the lead player. That was Buddy Childers' chair. Maynard played third and did a lot of screech playing. When he had his own band, even then he wasn't the lead player. He always had other guys around him doing the heavy lifting. In the 70s and early 80s, it was Stan Mark. In the 80s and 90s, it was guys like Roger Ingram and Wayne Bergeron. Now, honestly, I could do a 2-hour-plus show on lead trumpet players. There are so many, I hesitate to mention a bunch because I know I'll miss some really important ones throughout the history of the music. But there is one guy that I cannot leave out of this episode. The guy, to me, was a true game changer for many reasons. Back in the late 1980s, I was playing in a group called the Jazz Revival Orchestra, now known as the Jazz Heritage Orchestra. I got the chance to play with this gentleman as a guest artist, and honestly, I really didn't know who he was or his impact on big band music especially. He was the nicest guy, and man, it was a lot of fun to play with him. He was the king of hard swing and style. He was the voice of the brass section when he played lead. From that chair, he gives any band a musical vocabulary because of how he plays. He was also a master soloist, especially using the plunger mute. And yes, it is what you think it is. He also plays great solos using things like a cup mute. He played with Jimmy Lunsford from 1939 to 1942. He played for the Count Basie Orchestra on some of the greatest recordings that band did, such as the Atomic Mr. Basie, Basie Plays Hefty, and Chairman of the Board. He played with Gerald Wilson and Lionel Hampton, and of course you knew it was coming because it seems like I reference this band every week. He was an original member of the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. He finally spent 25 years playing on the Tonight Show Band with Johnny Carson from 1967 to 1992. I'm talking about the great Snooky Young. Here he is playing the shout section of a tune performed by the Count Basie Orchestra on the album Chairman of the Board. This may be the technically simplest lead trumpet part you'll hear, but no one, and I mean no one, swings it harder or plays it better than Snooky did. The tune is written by Thad Jones, and it's called The Deacon. And it leads me perfectly into my guest this week. So my guest is lead trumpet player of the SKatch Anderssen Orechestra, Mr. Scott Mckee. What's up, Scott?
What's up, Eric?
So let's talk about some lead trumpet stuff.
Okay.
All right. So you have been playing lead trumpet for how long?
Long time, since college days, I guess probably around 2001 or 2, with professional bands probably around 2002.
So what made you move in the direction of lead trumpet?
Well, when I first started college, I wanted to play in an orchestra. I didn't think about big bands that often. I knew about it because growing up, my dad, he was really into jazz and big band stuff and the show tunes and all that stuff.
Sure.
So I listened to it and I loved it and it was great. But my thing was I really wanted to play classical trumpet until I went to college and met some guys like Steve Zambori.
Okay.
And another guy named Mark Stotts, who's a trombone player. And they introduced me to Basie and Ellington.
Nice.
And then what made me really want to play lead trumpet is I heard Snooky Young play The Deacon. And there's this shout in there. And it's just simple. It's like, ba, 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 doo, da. It's real simple, but it was swinging so hard. I was like, yeah, I want to do that.
I want to do that.
Yeah. And of course, I loved like Arturo and Maynard and all those guys, but,
sure.
And that was great. And I love that. But for some reason, that just swinging those couple notes is just like it got my heart, and I was like, "Yeah, I want to do this."
Well, I don't know if you know, I've been trying to. I've been keeping a tab on it. I'm waiting for it to officially come out. Jazz Lines has been trying to get all of the rights from Thad's estate to finally publish that.
Oh, really?
Like actually publish. They published The Elder, which is like the longer version. It's like the 7-minute tune that he wrote for Basie's band, which was kind of not really the usual Basie thing. They usually do things that long. But they've been talking about the Deacon for like 2 years. So I keep trying to hit up Jeff Sultanoff and saying, hey, what's up with the Deacon, man? Because when you publish it, I want it.
Yeah, I want it too, because I don't think I've never played that.
So that's one. I'll assume that Snooky Young is one influence.
Oh yeah, big time.
So who are some of the other guys that you got hip to, or who hipped you to them?
Well, just listening to Kenton's band, like Buddy Childers, of course,
Sure.
and Al Porcino,
right,
from Thad Jones, Mel Lewis. Snooky is by far probably the biggest one, and then more modern guys like Wayne Bergeron. Bill Chase was great. I loved his lead playing in Woody Herman's band,
right?
Of course, that's amazing.
Sure.
I more think of big bands like Basie's band or Ellington's band. I'm not
that fat sound.
Yeah. It's all about the sound and the time and the feel more than the notes. This is how you play the notes.
So you had to learn. Obviously, you're not going to learn to play lead trumpet in high school or college. So, like, who did you wind up working with, or who kind of gave you the ideas, along with obviously listening is a big thing?
Well, let's say so maybe I'll just go back to what also helped me when I was younger is I was at Cleveland State, and I was practicing, and I was taking a break, just wandering around the school, and I heard this big band playing, like down in one of those practices with G8 or something. And I was like, man, this band, it's like 9:00 at night. What the heck? Who are these guys? And I would listen, and it turned out to be Jazz Heritage Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
And the band sounded great. So I went in there, and when they took a break, and I was like, hey, I think you guys sound great. Do you mind if I just hang out and listen? He said, sure. So I listened. And afterwards I went up to him. I was like, I would love to get a lesson. He's like, well, I'm kind of far away. I'm in Cincinnati. You should take a lesson from that guy. And he pointed at Dennis Reynolds.
Oh.
Dennis turned around and was like, who, me? So that's when I first met Dennis. And, I studied with him for 5 years every week, and he didn't charge me a dime. He charged me a cup of coffee.
Nice.
So that was like my first influence on lead trumpet, was listening to him and listening to that band. So he was, just listening to him, and that's how I met you, was through him.
Right.
And SKatch Anderssen, and he invited me out to a rehearsal.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he did. That was one of the first times I heard him play lead, was at the rehearsal, right out front. I remember that you guys played second race, and he told me, go sit out in front. And I heard him play it, and he just was roaring. I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I got to sound like that, because he's got that big sound
right
in your face. And it was right there, second race, and it was just me in the audience. I was like, oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that became your home, and you've been playing in my bands ever since.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Just to kind of tie in, we talk about obviously sound and the people that you've listened to. What would have been the benefits that you found from playing in the salsa bands, or even playing classical, how it helps your lead playing for big bands?
Well, the salsa stuff, for sure, it's endurance. It's all an endurance test, and it's all because everything is so in your face.
Right.
And high and loud, and it's an endurance test. You have to,
sure.
Play like that all night. And if you don't, I play with Sammy DeLeon, and at the end of the night, if I'm not playing something, he'll look at me like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, right.
You got to do this. So that's how it helps with the lead playing, it's an endurance test.
Yeah.
And then the classical stuff, that helps with sound and accuracy. The way that I approach it a lot is I'm a musician. I'm playing music. I try not to think about it as I'm playing this style. I'm not trying to change the way my setup or anything like that. There are things that do help with that. Different mouthpieces for, give a different sound.
Yeah.
But to me, it's all music. It's how do I fit? How do I make my sound work for whatever group I'm playing in?
Right.
When I warm up, I do the stamp studies, and I do Clark studies, and that just helps me get centered and make sure everything works before I even try to get in the upper register. Trumpet's very demanding, and it's you just have to try to make it as easy as possible, and all that stuff kind of helps, trying to make it as effortless as possible, which never happens.
But so obviously, yes, you play lead, and I know playing Cleveland Jazz Orchestra, you get the opportunity to play the other chairs. What's the different thought process for, let's say you get called and you're going to play third trumpet on a gig as opposed to playing lead?
It's more of my job in that role, if I'm playing second or third, fourth, whatever. My job is to make the lead trumpet player sound good.
Okay.
And it's the lead trumpet player's job to make the band sound good.
Right.
So it's all we all have a certain role to play. And I'm trying to play, if I'm playing second or third, I'm going to play with the lead player, whoever it is. And I'm not going to, it's a hierarchy. It's kind of like a dictatorship.
Sure.
If the lead player is playing something that I don't agree with, that's my problem. I have to follow him. It's my job to follow him.
Right.
And then when I'm playing lead, I expect the same thing out of the other guys. It's like, this is how I'm playing it. You got to follow me. This is what we're going to do. Yeah. And it's just, you just have to enter in and be humble enough to trust whoever's playing lead to follow them. We all have a job.
Right.
And it's like, when I'm hired to do this job, I'm going to do that job.
And that's one of the things that we talked about. The series of episodes that I'm doing right now is about building the big band. Everybody has an important part, but obviously there's a few people in the band that are a little more important because they're doing a lot more as far as the leadership role. Mm-hmm. How do you kind of get your mindset in line when you get on the bandstand and you're waiting for the guy to count, or whoever it is, to count off the first tune? Where does your head have to be when you start?
So, well, I think it just depends on the role that I'm playing. If Monday night, if I'm playing lead, before, I try to warm up beforehand, and just try to make sure everything is I mean, this is as I approach every gig, just trying to make sure everything's working in all registers, because you never really know what part's going to have what. If I'm playing lead, I'm making sure that my head is in the music. I'm thinking about, I'm just trying to make as much of a musical performance as I possibly can.
Sure.
And then also I have to be in that mindset where like this is where the attitude comes in with like the lead, the typical lead trumpet player attitude. It's like you have.
Please tell me. That's not.
But you kind of have to approach it like that. You kind of have to be like, I'm the man. I have to be on it. And you don't have to be mean about it, but it's more of like, you have to come in there and being like, hey, I'm the section leader. I'm playing lead trumpet. I have to be on top of it.
You're the guy.
I'm the guy. If I'm playing third or something, my focus in is like, how is this lead trumpet player going to play this? How are we going to sound better as a section? I have to listen to him and follow exactly what he does.
Right.
I'm trying my hardest to be in their mind.
Yeah. So last question. If I'm going to go out and give a coaching to a band, what kind of knowledge am I stealing from you right now to tell the lead player to give them a little bit more of a level of success than they may have?
I would say the biggest thing that I tell students is listening. You got to listen to the stuff. Listen to the Basie band, old recordings of Snooky Young.
Sure.
Just stuff like that. Just listening is probably the biggest thing. That's how I learned, listening to recordings of Snooky, and there's that recording with the Jazz Heritage Orchestra. I used to listen to that all the time.
Right.
And just trying to see, how is he swinging? How are these guys playing the quarter notes?
Right.
How are they playing the eighth notes? That's a big thing. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Another thing is working on sound. Sound is big. Trying to make a big sound. Dennis, I'm trying to make sure I get the quote right. Playing lead trumpet, you have to play in any style, in any key, at any time, in any register. That's easier said than done, of course. Yeah. You always have to do your homework, do the fundamentals.
Sure.
So I think that's like those two things, listening and like fundamental trumpet stuff.
Okay, two last ones.
Okay.
Favorite chart that you play on Monday night?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I know, because the book's so good.
It is good. Yeah. As much as I'm reluctant to say this, but Slauson Cutoff is a great chart.
Yeah. And
it's like, it's such a pain to play, but it's also really fun to play when my chops are working right.
Right.
It's a great chart. But it's hard to label just like, oh, this is my favorite. 3-in-1 is a great. Anything by most of the stuff by Thad is I love playing.
Right.
Anything Basie. It's hard to just determine which one.
All right. Last question. Chart that you know of that you would like to play that we haven't played yet. And although you did say one, so I already know the Deacon is one.
The Deacon,
and that's
one.
Coming. That will happen. I'm telling you right now.
A chart that we haven't played that I really want to play. Ah, man, I don't know. I think we played a lot of stuff that I like. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about that. I don't think there is one.
Well, now you have homework.
Now I have homework to do.
All right, man. Cool. Well, thanks for your time again. And
thanks for having me.
This week's replay on Monday during our usual time, since we're not playing the replay on Facebook Live, is featuring you.
Really?
So, yeah,
awesome.
It'll be a combination that we're putting together of a bunch of different performances that we've done over the past year or two of things that either feature you as a soloist or, just playing some great screaming lead parts. So
awesome.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Have a good one.
Before I head out, one quick follow-up. After I taped this episode, I found out that Thad Jones' chart, The Deacon, is now available through the ejazzlines.com website. A special thanks to Jeff Sultanoff for tracking me down and letting me know that this was released. It is officially in the SAO library, so Scott, as well as the entire band, will be playing it as soon as we get back to playing together. All right, Tall Ned Tate, I need a little traveling music, please. Once again, time to wrap things up. I hope you enjoyed hearing from my guest, Scott McKee, about the role of the lead trumpet player in a big band. You can find out more about him on Facebook, and you can hear him regularly with many groups in the Cleveland area, but especially with the SKatch Anderssen Orechestra, Cleveland's best Monday night big band. You can hear them on Facebook Live at 8 p.m. Eastern every week for one set of great modern big band music. And tonight, we feature Scott McKee, so definitely tune in. You can follow the band on Twitter at SAO Jazz, on Instagram at SAO Big Band, and if you can, swing by the Patreon page at www.patreon.com/SAO Big Band to show your support. The BigBandology podcast is also sponsored by BAC, the Best American Craftsman, makers of my custom bass trombone and Model 4 tenor trombone. BAC, get in the loop. Next week, we talk about another aspect of building the big band. We look at the final piece of the foundation and discuss the role of the drummer in driving the band and making sure everyone is in line with what's happening in the music. Until then, I'm Eric Dregney. Thanks for checking in. Be safe and keep swinging.